Welcome back to Thought Provoking Conversations, where we get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And today's episode invites us into a space many shy away from, but desperately need to understand more deeply. And that is dating while raising children. Whether you're a parent, a potential partner, or someone figuring out how to build meaningful connections, today's discussion is about more than romance. It's about responsibility, emotional maturity, and timing. I'm your host, Tim Williams, and joining me today is someone whose journey I deeply respect. That is Ashley Kemp. She's a loving mom, a resilient woman, and someone who knows firsthand what it means to navigate dating while raising a child with unique needs. Her son was diagnosed with autism at just 3 years old, and over the years, Ashley has learned a lot about discernment, patience, and how to protect the peace she's built for her family. Together, we're going to explore what it looks like to intentionally integrate into someone else's life when a child is already a part of the picture. We'll reflect on our own experiences, both the challenges and lessons, and we'll ask hard but necessary questions. Those are, how do you know someone is ready to step into a dynamic that already includes a child? But then, what boundaries help preserve emotional safety for both the parent and the child? And then lastly, we want to look at what does emotional availability really look like when you're no longer just dating one person, but building trust with two or more hearts in the process. Look, you all, this episode isn't about having all the answers. It's about offering honesty, encouragement, and reflection to anyone walking this journey. So what I want you to do is grab your headphones, take a deep breath, and let's talk about the weight of intentional integration. Ashley, it is great to have you here on Thought Provoking Conversations. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Look, I don't want to take away from your highlight. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and just your story?
So, I'm an autism mom and I'm raising my son, Isaiah, who's on the autism spectrum. He was diagnosed at the age of 3 years old, and I'm from Arkansas. So, yeah, that's pretty much just me raising my son.
Understandable. And so, with the topic of today, which is dating with kids and being
Yeah.
intentional about the integration within this dating journey, I know when we were talking about this conversation, it was just, the curiosity struck because we're both
Yeah.
parents, single parents at that.
Mhm.
And I wanted to see what does that look like when it came to how you maneuver and really navigate the dating journey with a child, but then you have a more unique position than even I do in a sense of your son's unique lifestyle. And so to first and foremost, kind of, if we would just kind of lean in on that piece right there and be as transparent as you want. I'm not going to force anything, but you want to at least kind of fill the audience in on what that journey is like being a mom to your son.
So, with the journey of raising a child with autism, I would say it's been a long journey. With raising him, it's like, I think it's important to prioritize our mental health, especially being a parent. And I also feel like, you can't pour from an empty cup, you know, because I have to take care of myself in order to take care of him, and I can't pour into someone else. You see what I'm saying? So with raising him, my son, he takes a lot of my time and attention and focus, So with dating someone or someone coming into my life, so they have to have the patience and the understanding, especially for, a child like Isaiah, and he comes first in my life. So like with that, and then dealing with my mental health, that's a lot too, with raising Isaiah.
Understandable. So, like for me, I remember my journey. Again, my journey was a little bit different. I have talked to what other women who had kids, but my true experience of having to really apply what we're talking about today was with my son's mom. When we met, she already had a child.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was now, granted, before I met her, I was already priming myself in a sense of I knew I wanted to be married. I knew I wanted to be in
Yeah.
a very serious relationship and things of that nature. So I understood there were things that I needed to work on my journey. But specifically coming from a single mom household, I've never been against speaking to someone who has a child. I guess for me, I was thinking to myself, how dare I convict a woman for having a child and being single now with this child? But my mom is the same way. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I couldn't do that. That's contradicting. That would have been contradicting in my own opinion. And so I've always been open to dating women with kids. That being said, met my son's mom. She had a kid, and it wasn't a hard thing for me to shape my mind around. I was okay with the idea already, so that was already half of the battle of just overcoming the mental aspect of what does it look like to date a woman with a kid. But then having to get into that fold and actually learn exactly their ways, what were their family practices, or the lack of those family practices that maybe
Mhm.
I had been brought up on
Yeah.
and was not seen within the household. And so when I looked at that, there was these experiences and things of the nature where I'm like, okay, I see that these pieces over here, based upon the things that I was used to, these
Yeah.
pieces are connected, but these pieces over here aren't as connected. And so, how do I intentionally navigate that landscape, but do it in a way that is not going to be disruptive, and not only disruptive, but that is not going to seem as if I'm coming over and just trying to take over everything and it has to be my way.
Yeah.
So before I go any deeper into that point, I would like to know, in your journey of dating, what has that been like when we look at a disruptive presence when it pertains to both you and Isaiah and the opportunities to date someone?
So I really haven't just dated, like going out on dates and stuff like that. Like I said, my son, he takes all my time and attention. And I basically feel like when someone comes into my life, I feel like they have to, I feel like it's all about their actions, like showing genuine interest in me. And I feel like, the signs of readiness is like, open communication, understanding, and, someone that expresses commitment to building a lasting, forever relationship. And I also feel like someone that's, wanting a future with me. And the thing of it is, it's just not, them only coming into my life. You're coming into my son's life as well, and I feel like there has to be like some kind of balance there. And, they have to love kids, because I just don't bring any guy around my son with him being autistic. And they have, like I said, they have to have the patience and the understanding for a child like Isaiah. And then also, I have to see how they interact with my.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talk about that interaction piece, it's always a topic of conversation when you're dealing with people with kids. And the
Mhm.
question is, when is the right time to actually introduce someone to your child? And while I know this question or this answer will vary for everybody in their unique situations, so I'm kind of curious about yours, and then I'll share mine as well.
Okay. So I feel like the right time to introduce, I wouldn't say the first time. I would never bring someone around the first time because, like, when you're dating someone, you have to see how they are as a person, their character, and, like I said, to see if they love kids. And just basically just getting to know that person for who they are, before I would bring someone around my son. I feel like that's the whole thing. Like, does this person, like, do they know God? Can you pray for me? Do you know your word? Do you have substance? Can you fast? Do you have character? I feel like those are the main things, that before bringing someone around my son.
That and for me, where was it? I'm looking for my notes. So here we go. It was a sermon my pastor preached. It was called Love and Hip Hop, and he really simplified dating, and I loved how he simplified it. And then I'll go right into talking about my approach or my opinion on that. But he said, when when you're looking to date, and specifically date intentionally, I'm really big on intentional dating, and that leads towards a marriage. We're not just dating to have fun, but we're dating for a purpose. And so, as a Christian, one thing that must be, it's a non-negotiable, is that my partner must have a relationship with Christ
Yes, that's number
and will
one.
submit to Christ.
Yes.
Yes. So I loved it, and how he stated it. He said, whoever it is that we're dating for marriage must have Christ, which comes from 2 Corinthians 6:14.
Yes.
But 1 Corinthians in 7:39, which is post-married, they must be saved. And this is where we come to that thing where it's talking about unequally yoked, or are you all equally yoked or unequally yoked? Well, a
Yes.
Christian with a non-Christian makes for a very difficult life. Life is already difficult as is.
Yes.
But now that you all are paired with one another for life, which is the way that marriage was designed, then it just makes things very rough when you have a different belief system than your partner does.
Yes.
So from there, it was companionship. What is, or are they a suitable companion, or what is the compatibility like between you two? And I would go as far as to say emotional compatibility,
Mhm.
mental compatibility, physical compatibility,
Yes.
but then spiritual compatibility. So we're going to
Hmm.
hit all lanes on that one.
Yes. And let
So
me say
companionship.
one thing here. I feel like you'll know a person is from God by their fruits. Like, is a person trying to help you get closer to God, or are they trying to pull
Yes.
you away from God? Like I said, you'll know a person is from God by their fruits. You'll know that's your
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
I love that. And I love when people, it's a funny thing. People put up the facades where I'm going to put this mask on. I want you to see me in this particular way. And
Mhm.
this is a good point for all listeners to take, take the time to not only listen, but just pay attention, pay very close attention to those that you are dating. While, yes, in the beginning phases, everything is great, right? They make you
Yeah.
feel some type of way. They're
Mhm.
doing this, they're doing A, B, C, but eventually they begin to fall off, specifically if they have a mask on and they're trying to portray something that they're not. And,
Right.
I believe this is one of the important things about timing, that especially when you have a kid, I get certain things happen and maybe you have to maneuver a different way. So I'm not here to judge or anything of that nature, because I have my own story and opinion about it. But that being said, when you do put in the time to understand somebody and actually learn both the ups and the downs, you
Yes.
can then begin to see whether or not that person is truly compatible for you.
Yes.
Also, one thing I would like to add to that is that you also need to know exactly what it is that you're looking for to truly understand if somebody is compatible for you. So if you are out here just dating with no intentions and have no idea what it is that you desire in life, what you desire in a partner, then, well, it's very hard for you to be in this position to pay attention and understand whether or not this person is good for you, no matter how
Yeah.
shiny all the bells and whistles that they bring in the
Mhm.
initial connection are. So
Yeah.
that's
And
my
then it's
TED
like
talk on that
some-
one.
and then it's like if something or someone doesn't align with God, then you don't want that, you know.
Indeed. Indeed. I agree with that hands down. And then the third one for the relationships in dating is covenant. And I love the way he stated. He says, does this person have a covenant keeping character? Meaning, is this person faithful and consistent? And I love covenant because when we think about marriage, I'm a believer, I'm a firm believer
Mhm.
that, I don't believe in divorce. Now, here's the thing. I know divorce is a very real thing. When I say I don't believe in divorce, I mean it in a way of I don't believe it for myself. So I will be careful and I will be intentional about who I actually say I do to.
Yeah.
I want to be married one time.
Right.
So that being said, the question is, does this person have a covenant keeping character? And my pastor went on to state that people can be faithful and they can be consistent in various areas in their life. They're faithful and consistent to their business. They're faithful and consistent to their child. But the question is, are they faithful and consistent to you?
Yes.
Now, if they can't be faithful and consistent to you, again, that needs to be a aha moment. You need to look closer. Why are they not being faithful and consistent to you? And then the last one, which is where we're talking about right now, is children. And the way he stated this was, does the person that you're dating, are they able to effectively disciple your child? Are they able to effectively be a positive role model, a leader that your child can look up to? I always tell everybody, that I'm not looking for a new mom for my son. He has a mom, regardless of how things may be, he has a mom. But what I am looking for is somebody who can be a positive role model and that he can look at this lady and say, hey, you know what? I love the way that she carries herself. And these
Hmm.
are characteristics of a woman that
Yes.
I desire to build with when that day comes about. And so, when we're talking about effectively discipling a child, it requires, again, time. You need to be able to pay attention to this person. You need to get to
Hmm.
learn the individual that you're talking to. And so, my approach with the original question of timing when to invite somebody into the fold, I personally would desire that at least I would always say almost say 8 months to a year. Now, that's how I'm thinking in my head. I will say that I actually recently got into a relationship.
Hmm.
And because of so what happened was, again, my goal in my head was 8 months to a year. Let's focus on just having fun, getting to know each other, and see I can learn things. But she asked to come to church. And I was like, I don't have a problem with you coming to church.
Yeah.
Like, you can come to, like, I'm never going to tell anybody no to coming to church.
Mm.
And so, but what I didn't think about when I originally said yes was like, oh, shoot, me and my son go to church. And so, by way of her coming to church, she is now going to meet my son, which she met my son. And now I paid very close attention to that interaction. And by way of her meeting my son and seeing their interaction, I was pleased by the way that she at least carried herself from that initial point. There was a certain type of gravitation that I approved of, and I didn't feel as if there was a mask on. But I did realize, like, oh man, still, had I done things a little bit differently, while yes, I don't mind you coming to church, let's push it off a little while. And again, because not necessarily that I don't want you at my church. I just don't I wanted to take that time to continuously get in to know you so that I can know that you were the right person in regards to meeting my son at a set time. Now, we fast forward, things are great. We're not having no problems. I haven't regretted my decision, thank God.
Yeah.
But that is my input on
Hmm.
that timing. And so, what do you say? I mean, do you have a particular number or time frame?
Well, I will say that you don't want to rush something that won't last forever. You don't want to rush into something that won't last. So I would say
Agree.
I would probably like 7 to 8 months, probably getting to know someone, maybe like going on dates and just basically seeing if they're like genuinely interested in you. Like, I feel like when someone is interested in dating you, I feel like the person should maybe plan, initiate, invest time more, and, not try to just vibe over like endless text messages, hanging out.
Yeah.
I just feel like, like, let's just say you're not an option, you're not a placeholder, you're the main event. Let's just say that. But I would feel like it'll
Yeah.
take months for me to actually get to know a person before I let them meet my son, because like Isaiah, he doesn't really like to just be around anyone. He's kind of like more to himself. He likes being around his grandparents a whole lot. So like, I don't want to like let someone meet him and then, they stop coming around, especially like if my son gets used to being around that person, you know what I mean? So I would say for me,
Right.
it some months or maybe a year, if so, for them to meet my son. Yeah.
No, totally understandable. I have no problem with it. Again, if I could go back, I would have given it more time.
Yeah.
I'm thanking God that, I haven't regretted my decision. But that being said, when we again now taking it from the approach of the timing aspect of introducing them to your child, sorry. What does it now look like for you per se when it comes to initially bringing up the conversation of having a child? Do you feel like if you're interested with someone that you choose to have, get to know them, and figure out what the initial connection is and chemistry is between you all before you introduce that you have a child? Or is that just right off back something you're going to make clear?
Well, first off, I always let someone know I have a son. That's first. He's number one. He comes first. So, I mean, I let the person know, I have a son who has autism. I'm upfront about it, just to kind of see whether they like kids or not, or if they're like, have the patience for a child like that. Because not a lot of people have
Yeah.
the patience and the understanding for a child with autism. So I would kind of dive into that first, not let them meet him right away, but like just see like if they have the patience for someone like that, because I would
Yeah.
clearly get to know them, still get to know them. But it's just for me, I would just dive into just, hey, do you love kids, or do you have the patience or would they have the patience for a child with autism?
Yeah. N- Now, I think in my input, I remember it was a certain point where I would tell I would tell people like, I don't like to deal with children. And it wasn't that I didn't really like to deal with children. I was running into these bad children, like, golly, they were
God.
bad. And not that I was talking to anybody with any bad children. Thank God
Right.
I haven't run into that. But you be around the cousins, or you go to parties where people bring their
Mm-hmm.
kids and the kids ain't listening, fighting each other. It's just be like, oh my God. So I was I was using that perception off of thinking like this is just how it's gonna always be. And then met my son's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, I said met my son's mom. Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
said it right. Met my son's mom, and of course she had her kid. And dude was cool, like real great personality. I can definitely tell that he had been raised with love and care.
Yes.
Of course, yeah, he had his own unique features and personalities, things of that nature. I think that comes with just any and everybody. But I was grateful to go through that experience because, and she was right off back with me. She told me right up front, I mean, I should say, that she had a child, and I was like, cool. I have no problem with that. Again, I've already primed myself, and I already have the idea and mentality that I'm okay with dating someone with kids. So I didn't have a problem with that. And then
Right.
if we kind of fast forward, now I have a son and I've now jumped back into the game. I was perfectly fine with telling people that I had a kid. But then
Yeah.
I realized when I originally got on to like these dating apps, I didn't necessarily put it out there. Not that I was trying to hide it, because
Right.
I would actually like in the conversations I was having with people, then I would just go ahead and be upfront. Because I mean, again, just like you, my son is my life. I love my little man.
Yes.
And I'm at a point now where I want to protect my peace and his peace. And so I
Mm.
don't want to, put any unnecessary BS in his life, nor do
Yes.
I want to, make the wrong decisions because I'm being careless.
Yeah.
And so that being said, I was more than happy to share that. And I felt really good when I met and ran into the people who would simply say, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I felt good about that is because deep down inside, I think you can kind of tell yourself the type of person you are,
Yeah.
potentially depending on what happens at that scenario. Are you that one person who begins to think internally saying, dang it, I shouldn't have told her that, or I shouldn't have told him that? And like if that is the case, well, why not? I mean, that's a huge thing that's a part of your life that's not going to change. Like that's your child. They're not going to
Oh
go
yeah.
anywhere.
How do you protect your peace in that process?
For me, it was simply understanding I had a position And that position was that I am Simba's father, and Simba has me to depend on.
Yeah.
And so no matter what, I would not myself or anybody else make me feel lesser than or whatever just by way of having a son. First off, I'm 33 years old. I had my son at 31. So, I killed the game in the sense of like I wasn't out here having him at a young age. Not that that's a problem. My mom had me when she was 16 years old. So there's no judge in that particular case. But
Hmm.
my family laughs to this point. We would, to this day, they would be like, Tim, I'm really surprised you made it to the age that you made it without having a
Yeah.
kid. And I'm grateful because
That's
now that I
good.
have a child, I got to see the maturity required to be able to effectively lead and raise my child. And
Hmm.
so now that I'm at a much older age, I have more maturity when it comes to protecting my peace from people's words or their thoughts in regards to me and me being a father. It's simply put, all I need to worry about is
Hmm.
what God has called me to do. And I've asked God plenty of times that, hey, Lord, I want to be a great steward over what it is that you've given me.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that he was going to give me a kid, and especially he was going to give me a kid the way that our journey took place.
Yeah.
But it's been such a beautiful journey for me because I've grown patience, I've grown understanding, but most importantly, I've grown as both a man and a leader to be able to now effectively disciple my child, but hopefully as well be able to integrate, as we're talking about, into
Yeah.
someone else's life and not only effectively lead them, but if they have a child, which my partner, she does have a child, I'm now able to learn, but then also position myself to effectively disciple him, even if it's just doing little things here and there. Again, it's not as much as telling them, hey, I need you to do this or do that, or I need you to
Yeah.
look at life this way, but it's showing them. Kids, they see more than they hear in the sense of
Absolutely.
my son, what I think he did something, and I could recall, I was like, that's something I do. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I never taught him how to do that. And I realized at that moment, I was like, oh my God, this little dude is watching me. And so it told me I have to be careful in the way that I operate and move throughout life because at the end of
Hmm.
the day, he is going to learn more based upon what I do than what I try to teach him.
Yeah. So I
So,
feel like with protecting my peace in the process, I feel like it's more so about, setting boundaries, maybe like self care and, making the right choices and maybe just kind of limit, negativity and just accepting what you cannot control in that process.
yeah,
And also being mindful of what you consume every day, whether it's
true.
social media or just, certain things like that. And like, I had Isaiah when I was 17 years old. I was still in high school at that time and I had graduated high school. And now I'm
Hey,
28 years old. So, yeah. And so he'll be 11 years old June the 2nd. He will. But I
okay.
was still young in high school when I had him. But like I do feel like it's more about, protecting or trying to prioritize your mental health and just kind of limit, distractions and everything. Like I said, you can't pour into someone from an empty cup.
True.
So
True.
yeah.
I agree with that. And one of the things I'll kind of note from the mental health piece, my son's mom went through a specific journey. I'm not going to go into her story. That's hers to share. But when it pertains to the mental health piece, she did have her journey with that.
Hmm.
And it taught me a lot about the importance of mental well-being.
Yeah.
That is conversations that we're having. I will be posting a
Hmm.
coming up soon podcast or episode in regards to mental well-being, and I think it's very important that not only are you cognizant of where your mental well-being is, but that you are actively doing what it takes to ensure that it is balanced out as best as
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
Whether, again, for me, I do like to listen to podcasts, and I'm listening to podcasts that are speaking life into me, not
Yes.
drama filled podcasts. Music here lately, I started
Hmm.
recreating my gospel playlist, and I like to allow that to feed into me. Now, don't get me wrong, I like to listen to other
Oh yeah.
music too,
Got some gospel
every now and then.
well, so yeah.
Yeah, so but like even before we got on, I was listening to a song by this guy by the name of Zacardi Cortez. And what was
Hmm.
it? It was "Work It Out for Me." And first off, he was killing it, y'all. Go listen to the song. That boy was killing that song. But just by listening to it, I was feeding my spirit. And I think you made a very great point of you have to be careful on
Hmm.
what you invite into your life, both visually, audibly,
Hmm.
and physically, because what you're inviting into your life, what you're eating on, or what you're feeding on,
Right.
will ultimately showcase
Mhm.
in your life in some shape, form, or fashion. So I could not
Yeah.
agree with you anymore on that one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I
It's
love that.
very important. That's something I've struggled with is my mental health over the years. And I feel like, with mental health and your well being, I feel like it's, your diet. It's not only what you eat, it's more like what you listen to, what you watch, and, like the people you surround yourself with. And it's
Yeah.
most importantly, it's like, the things that you're allowing into your body as well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Now, as we go back to dating with kids and what
Mhm.
does it look like purposeful integration, what have been some learned lessons based upon whatever experiences that you've had when it pertains to just being aware and intentional behind how you move when it comes to inviting somebody into both you and Isaiah's life?
So for me, I would say not to just jump into any relationship because if you do that, it's not going to last. Like you have to really take time out and get to know the person for who they are. And I feel like for me, if someone, like I said, comes into my life, you're not only going to be getting to know me, but my son as well. And I also feel like, when that person comes, when God sends that person, I just want them to get to know me for who I am. Like, I want them to go straight towards my heart, my mind, and my soul. So it's not about a pretty face, and all that. It's more so about substance, like I said in the beginning. So, yeah.
I love substance.
Mhm.
You all, I want to make it clear. She said it. I didn't say it.
Mhm.
I'm just going to use her words so I can basically promote to you all what I call deeper connections masterclass. You all, look, when we talk about substance, I'm currently working with a few individuals who we are perfecting what's called the deeper connections masterclass. It is a course that is built for singles and couples who are intentionally dating with the purpose of what? Marriage. And it's about basically removing surface level conversation and
Mhm.
saying, you know what? No, we need to get deep. We can't keep building these relationships on surface level conversations. And then when we get into the thick of these relationships, specifically, you get married to this individual and then you start to learn what in the heck? I don't know this person at all. What happened?
Right.
They were this person before. Now we're married and they're this person. And so with deeper connections, it's about really getting to the core, the root of
Mhm.
who a person is. And the only way you can do that is by, I'm not going to say the only way, but one of the ways that you can do this is by asking better, wiser, deeper questions. And then
Yeah.
being willing to break down the answers that they give you, which means
Mhm.
you have to be intelligent or wise
Right.
enough to understand that you just can't take for face value what somebody gives you. Lean into that. If they
Right. And
tell
it's
you
important
that,
to have those uncomfortable conversations, in that process.
very much so. Very much so. And one way my pastor told me, he said, Tim, I think the best way for dating and truly getting to know somebody is by leaning in on your past experiences and pains. So when you're asking questions, you need to speak to those pains and those experiences that you've gone through and
Mhm.
understand how will that person address you or address those situations should those come about. And for me, that was very, I guess, an aha moment for me to be able to say, okay, I can lean in on these experiences and pains, but I can lean in on them from a point of not trying to relive them, but trying to not only get to know my partner even better, but trying to understand how do we actually maneuver should those things come through. And this is where I say you got to lean in on the answers that they give. You know, if they say that their favorite color is green, this is very basic, probably not the best
Basic.
one. Let's say this. Let's go with if they say, yes, I believe in Christ. Okay, that's great. Or even better, they'd be like, oh yeah, I believe in the Lord. Yeah. And that's the answer. And be like, okay, well, what Lord do you believe in? Huh? You know, because
Yeah, that's a good question.
many people believe in various different gods, and I only believe in one God, and I believe that there
That's
is
right.
only one God. And so, you know, I want to know that. I want to know that, oh, well, I do believe I'm a Christian, and that's great. But do you believe in going to church? Well, no,
Hmm.
I don't believe into going to church. You know, I don't need to go to church. Well, hold
Hmm.
on. Let's bag up. We need to
Right.
start asking questions. But then once we start asking these questions, we got to continue to lean in.
Hmm.
And one of the things I like to look at is that it's not, I don't want people to think of it as an interrogation that you're doing. You know, at the end of the day, what you're working towards is building a meaningful connection with somebody. And ultimately, this person, in the case of what we're talking about today, this person is going to potentially be a major piece within both you and your child's life.
Yeah.
And so, what you don't have time to do is be lazy or be complacent in the way of how you approach getting to know this individual. And then come to find out, not only have you wasted time, but you've also caused unnecessary frustration, turmoil, and just mess to be invited into not only your life, but your child's life as well. And so you owe both yourself and your child the ability to truly get to know the person that you're trying to build a life with, especially if you're intentionally dating towards marriage.
And I feel like, we have to have shared values that as well.
True.
And they have to believe in God
True.
the way believe in God. So yeah, with
Yeah.
that's a lot, because I wouldn't let just anyone come around my son. Like I said, I have to get to know them for who they are as a person before I introduce them to Isaiah. So
Indeed. And when we talk about the shared values, a good way that I was actually looking at a politician on Facebook. I just kind of was scrolling, the reels
hmm
came across, and he likes to have conversations with people almost about any and everything. But he said something, and I was like, man, I don't know if I fully agree with his particular stance in life, but this is the wonderful thing I love about people and differences. I always say just because people are different from you does not mean that you can't learn from them. Does not mean that you can't take something away from them. Yeah, they might have a different approach to life and a way of how they think. But be careful. Be careful when you just shut it completely down because there's always something that you can learn from and you can apply. Even if it's just a piece of the puzzle that you're applying, you can apply that piece and make your life even greater than what it was already. And in his stance on values, he said, look, I guess a guy had gotten up and asked about his girlfriend, how him and his girlfriend have really great chemistry, things of that nature. They've been together for some time now, and he was thinking about marrying this young woman. Well, the big difference though was they have different political views. And so what happened was, and the advice that this politician gave was that, look, you have micro level focuses and alignment, and then, or unalignment, and then you have macro level alignment. And so he said, micro alignment. Honestly, those things can either be worked out or not worked out. You don't have to necessarily agree on every single micro topic that you all hit upon.
yeah,
You all are two different people. And so you have different upbringings, you have different teachings, blah, 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 blah. And so that means not every single thing you're going to agree with. But on a macro level, you have to agree on the macro level topics. And when it pertains to who you serve, I serve Jesus Christ, and I believe in the
Right.
Trinity. And I believe that he died on the cross for our sins, and on the third day he
Absolutely.
raised again. You know, I believe in being in my parents or in my son's life and not just giving up on him when things get tough, that I'm going to fight for my son. I believe in not being a financial burden, not only to my life, but to my son's life and to my partner's life. That means I don't believe in leaving debt behind when I die because I wanted to go and live my life and never save money and things of that nature. You know, those macro level topics we have to be able to agree upon. Do you believe in truly what is it, separating from your parents when you get married? That you're not going to lean in on your parents on every single thing from decision making when it pertains to
Mhm.
you and your husband. You know, all of those things. I loved it because it's something that we as a people can easily overlook if we don't get out of what I call the cupcake phase. You
Yeah.
know, that's when you all Google eyes for one another, and like he can't do no wrong, she can't do no wrong, and you start to overlook some very important aspects about their life. And as you stated, yes, you all have to agree on the core aspects of what makes you you.
Yeah.
If you all can't agree upon that, it doesn't matter what the micro level disagreements are. The macro level disagreements is what's going to destroy you all and ultimately put you in a position where maybe you regret, you're frustrated. We talked about mental well-being. Now you mentally stressed out and feel like you don't got a hold of life. You're wondering why your kids doing this, why they looking at you this way. It's a ripple effect, and it all can be prevented, or some of it, if not most of it, can be prevented by way of being intentional about taking our time, getting a true
Yes,
understanding of
absolutely.
who the person we're talking to, and do they truly embody those values and characteristics we need for them to embody to effectively disciple our child when that day comes, that we allow that to be the case.
And always focus on that person's actions as well, you know.
Yes. Actions speak louder than words. Action speaks louder than words. All right. Awesome. Well, first and foremost, before I get into these questions, these juicy
Uh,
questions that we really got, do you have anything you want to say to the audience in regards to what we've been talking about?
I would like to say, well, first, I would like to say it's very important to take care of yourself. You know, prioritize your mental health, your well being. Don't pour, from an empty cup, things like that, And I feel like the key to life is falling in love with God and, having, that connection with Him and, always put God first in any and everything that you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I love that. All right. Hey, speaking of guy, you all, at the time of this recording, we're what, May 24th. This is Saturday. And I'm taking a side pivot real quick, you all. I got to go down into the city. So here recently, Ashley, we just got struck by a really, really bad tornado, and it devastated North City, which honestly is about 10 minutes away from where I live.
Yeah.
And I had not had the chance to be able to go down there yet. And I didn't want to be in the way,
I have
but I actually had to.
that lives there actually in St. Louis, and me and my
Yes,
mom
that's
we
right. You did
checked
tell me
on my
that.
family, and they're okay.
Okay, that's a blessing indeed. I'm glad that they are okay. I was taking my son down to drop him off with my mom, and I saw the devastation firsthand.
Oh, wow.
And it was bad. It was really bad. And so I wanted to take this time first and foremost to just say to those who are listening to the show today that either have family in St. Louis that were affected by this tornado, or if you're listening to this podcast and you personally were affected by the tornado, first and foremost, my condolences goes up to you and your loved ones in a sense of anything that you all might have lost through that horrific event. And if you unfortunately lost somebody to this horrific event, you all, I am again apologetic towards that. And my condolences goes out to you all. But as we were talking about Christ, I could not go further on into the show without just making it clear that at the end of the day, Lord is good and he is
Yes,
great.
he is.
And, even despite that, we're going to have challenging times. One of the things I've been saying here recently is that just because we're Christian, we believe in Christ, doesn't mean that we're exempt from hardships. God did not say that we would go through life without hardships. Actually, we're going to go
Hmm.
through more hardships because we are followers of Christ, because we are children of Christ. And that's because at the end of the day, there's a very real spiritual battle going on that the devil's trying to take us out, you all.
Hmm.
And while this was a natural disaster that happened, by way of it opened doorways for people to harbor hate, harbor malice, sadness, depression, slew of different emotions. And by way of what these looters have been doing as well, going into these people's homes and stealing things, you all, it's only inviting more negativity. And I just wanted to take the time out to say that God still sees you. God still is there with you, and he is not giving up on you, even despite this horrific hardship that you all are experiencing or that your family members are experiencing. God still sees you all. And I just want you to lean in on that. One of my favorite scriptures used to be trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, yet in all things acknowledge him and he shall direct you. That scripture is very, very, very prevalent right now in these times. Forget about just the
Yeah.
horrific disaster that we just experienced here in St. Louis, but these times specifically are crazy, you all. And so I just want you to lean in on Christ. Remember that he does have you. And that if you're still here today, you all, remember you still have purpose. Okay, my TED Talk is done. Ashley, you have anything else to say?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I've never really been on a camera or anything like that, but I really
Okay.
taking the time out and just reaching out and letting me join your podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no
And
problem.
having
No
the
problem.
uncomfortable conversations, so
Yeah, yeah, no problem. No problem whatsoever. And real quick, before we wrap up on the podcast, let me run through these questions and let's get your opinion. We can talk about it. So, first and foremost, when someone expresses interest in you while raising a child, what signals show that they're ready or not ready to integrate into your life? And then, specifically, how do you protect your peace in that process?
I feel like it's more so about someone showing their interest in you, genuinely, someone who talks about the future with you and how they treat me. I think that's basically number one, how they treat me and how I protect my peace. Like I said earlier, setting boundaries, self-care is important, and just practicing mindfulness, accepting what you can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that. And for me, I take the approach of not ready. Simply put, it is how they carry themselves.
Yeah, how they carry it.
Listen to the person. If you're really listening, you will begin to hear certain things that are going to either throw up yellow flags or red flags. How they way that they view certain things,
Yeah.
look at the way that they treat their family, specifically their mom. When they do get around kids, whether it be your kid or another kid, cousin, nephew, whomever,
Yeah.
how are they treating that kid? Be ever so aware and keep them eyes open. As far as protecting my peace, honestly, is simply put by having real conversations with these individuals and being willing to go as deep as I need to go, even if it's uncomfortable. There have been conversations that even I have had to have that were uncomfortable for me, specifically having to answer them because maybe and uncomfortable the discomfort came by way of sometimes I just didn't even realize that was something I needed to think about. And so I didn't have a answer at the particular time for it. But then when I began to think more about it, I was like, well, hold on. how do I look at that situation? Or how do I feel about that situation? How would I handle that situation? One of the things that, first and foremost, as a parent, and what I've learned is that there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
When I was, what Simba was about he was in the 2 to 4 month stage. Babies do what they do, they cry.
Yeah.
And I didn't gain the concept of there's typically three reasons on why a baby is crying. A, they hungry. B, they need to be changed. Or C, they need to go to sleep.
Right.
Um, and my lack of patience back then allowed me to be disruptive in my son's presence. And I remember I caught myself one day while I was frustrated, I was tired, and I remember I yelled. I was like, "Simba, be quiet. You get on my nerves."
Yeah. I had to
And I
learn how to
remember
pay my son. When he was diagnosed with autism, he's taught me that love needs no words. He's
Yeah.
an amazing kid, and I had to learn how to have the patience over the
Yeah.
years.
I think everybody has. One of the
Yeah.
things I made the mistake about praying for patience. Oh my God, that was the worst. I'm gonna tell y'all right now. Don't pray for patience unless you prepared to go through some stuff. Do not pray for patience. You all. I'm not. I don't know if you all heard the saying. Be careful what you pray for because
Yeah.
God will answer. But that being said, I didn't pray for patience at that particular time, but I will say because I went through a journey where God was working on my patience when I had this moment of my son's life, I was able to self assess and self check myself right then and there in the moment. And I said, wait a minute, why am I yelling? He is a baby. First off, he's going to do this. This is what babies do. They cry.
Yeah.
But there is a reason why he is crying. And I have to now learn these reasons. And so when it comes to protecting my peace, very much the same way I had to self reflect and self assess on the way that I was approaching Simba. I need to do the same exact thing when it pertains to intentionally dating. But then when I'm getting to know that person, let me think truly about what it is that they're saying or displaying to me. Are these the characteristic traits and mindsets that I desire my child to be raised upon? And again, a lot of this stuff sometimes takes time, which we go back
Yeah.
to our time frame of saying, you said between 7 to 8 months. I said 8 months to a year. Even despite like my story was a little bit different, I'm still taking that time to get to know my partner. And so it is important that you be diligent about timing and true understanding of who you're talking to.
Absolutely.
So, second question I have for you is what have you learned about emotional availability and timing when it comes to dating as a parent? And then how do you personally discern whether someone is a fit for the long haul?
Well, I feel like for dating as a single parent, I feel like that can be a challenge for me. I feel like it's more so about, creating that safe space for genuine connections, being open minded, honest, the ability to connect, sharing feelings, listening actively, and it's about building trust. And I
Okay.
also feel like you have to focus on that person's actions, like I said, and just basically someone that talks about the future with you.
I love that. Speaking to the emotional availability piece for me, that was where I lacked in my past relationships. My mom always made a joke. She's like, "Oh my God, I didn't show you enough love as a child, and that's just why you are this way." And I mean, I turned out to be a great guy, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I did have problems with being emotionally available and
Yeah.
showing up emotionally available in my relationships. And, for me, is only speaking of my experience, what helped me to overcome that was a beautiful blessing that God gave me by the way of, or by the name of Simba.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to go too deep into the story
Hmm.
because she has
Yeah.
her story.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you my version of how
Okay.
it's been a blessing. My son's mom, or Simba, his mom went through some severe ordeals when we speak of mental well-being.
Hmm.
That being said, it's been me and Simba since he was 1 month old. or 2 months old, sorry, 2 months old. And I always thought that I would be the tough love dad. I'm
Yeah.
gonna show you tough love, and then mom will come
Mhm.
around and do the nurturing and things of that nature.
Yeah. That's how I am with my sons. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
he's kinda spoiled, he loves his
yeah,
mama. Yeah.
hey,
And I
ain't
feel
nothing
like,
wrong with it.
a child, you know, they're a blessing, they're a gift from God. So,
True
yeah.
blessing. And I will say, by way of having to raise my son by myself, it taught me how I needed to be emotionally available and how I
Mhm.
had to be a better nurturer. I can't show my son 24/7 what tough love looks like. I
Yeah.
have to be able to hug on him. I have to be able to kiss him. I have to be able to just pat his back and let him know, like, hey, your dad is here. I love you. One of the things that I grew up and having a little bit of discomfort doing was being able to tell another man that, hey, I love you. And not in a way of anything crazy, but by way of saying, like, my friend, my best friend, he'd be like, hey, bro, I love you. And it would make me feel some type of way. All right, I got love for you too, man. But I realized, like, no, it's nothing wrong with saying this. I have to remove myself from the way of thinking that, society says telling another man and being a man that you
Yeah.
love him, oh, that's gay. No, that's just a way to express. I'm not gay because I'm telling my best friend. I do love my best friend. Like, we've gone through a lot of
Mhm.
stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that's my guy. But I don't have to conform to the way of society's way of thinking and say that, or if I say that now I'm gay. No, no, no. What I am is being able to confidently and effectively express myself and not feeling shamed behind doing so. And so with Simba, I wanted to make sure that he heard me saying, hey, son, I love you. And, I make sure that he says it back to me. And I'm continuously doing that same thing because I want to build a standard. I want to break the mold of what society has created for us and say, no, you can live
Mhm.
differently. And this is what it looks like to live differently and to be
Right.
confident within that difference. So, when it came to emotional availability, for me, Simba helped me to nurture that particular trait within me that I knew God had given me, but I just wasn't feeding. And now I'm grateful to be in that position where I can now feed that emotional availability. And so when my partner asked me, was I emotionally available today? I could with confidence say, yes, I am. And here's
Mhm.
why. So
Yeah.
that's mine. And then my last question for you is, what's one moment where your child's needs clash with your desires in dating? If so, and how did that moment shape your outlook on what intentional relationships really require?
Well, I would start off by saying maybe when my son is having a meltdown, I'll
Mhm.
just start there. And then I feel like what intentional relationships really require is commitment, trust, understanding. You have to listen to understand your partner. I feel like it's
Yeah.
all about being vulnerable with that person. And just like I said, having shared values, like do they believe in God the way that you believe in God, things like that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just want someone to, I don't know, take time out to get to know me because Isaiah, he's a lot. That's a lot for me. He takes all my attention.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Look, we ran into some technical difficulties when it came to the recording of this episode with Ashley, but we want to say thank you, Ashley, for joining me on Thought Provoking Conversations as we begin to talk about intentional dating when it looks or when it pertains to integrating those that we are talking to within our kids' life. And how do we do that in a way that is not disruptive, in a way that is respectful both to us, our kids, and to the person that we are dating? So I hope you all were able to learn a lot from that episode, and there are things that you can begin to take and apply within your day-to-day life. Look, we are working towards becoming emotionally intelligent leaders, and in that manner, we want to ensure that we are protecting our kids and doing what's right by them. So take what you need from this episode, apply it, and go out there and be successful in all that you do. Thank you for listening to Thought Provoking Conversations. Take care.